Good evening, everybody, and welcome to this poetry evening organized by the Skarina Library in London and the Anglo-Belarusian Society. And tonight our guests are the award-winning poet, Belarusian poet, Volha Hapeyeva, and her translator, poet and translator, Annie Rutherford. I'll pass on the microphone to Annie first, and hope you enjoy the evening. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Carolina, and a huge thanks to everyone at the Skarina Library and the Anglo-Belarusian Society for making this happen. It's actually, we've had one event so far, but it was before the book came out. So this feels like our first proper outing with this book, which is very exciting. And yeah, we had a pamphlet come out this year, which is very pretty. Which we're going to mainly read from and just have a fairly organic kind of mix of poems and chat, and then opening up to general sort of questions and discussion at the end. And it'll be about an hour max, so we should be done by tea time for anyone who's worried about that. So yeah, Volha, hi.
Hello. Hello, dear Annie. Thank you very much for this invitation. I should say that, yeah, Annie is a fantastic translator, and she is also a fantastic organizer of different things. And I think in contemporary world, if you work with poetry as a translator, it's also very good quality to have, to be also a good manager, because you have to promote somehow the poetry as a genre, which is unfortunately maybe is not so well read as prose, but I still never give up the hope that poetry will save the world. Yeah, so thank you very much, Carolina and Francisc Skarina Library in London for supporting us and giving the platform for us. Yeah, so we're very happy to present this book. Sure, thank you. Our thank you goes to English Pen Center, who supported us, and to the publishing house, ARC, who believed in us also, and risked to publish yeah, this bilingual chapbook. So I think we can tell about the book itself also during the event, or if you have any particular questions, you're welcome.
So I've written down as my first note how we met. So Volha and I actually translate the same German poet, which was how we encountered each other, and we were in this idyllic fairy tale-like village in the Swiss Alps, where they genuinely, it was a literary festival, and they genuinely on the first night of the festival took us up a mountain by cable car to have raclette, which I feel like they couldn't have actually made it any more Swiss than that. There was even a sign of Heidi somewhere. It was very Swiss. And yeah, that was how we first encountered each other. And Volha knew that I had studied Russian at university, and very shyly and awkwardly asked me if she could ask me a question.
Yeah, it took a lot of courage, you know, to approach it. Not because she's so like, but yeah, you never know, and sure. But I had this little hope, and then Nora also encouraged me and said, sure, she's a very nice person. You should definitely ask her. Yeah, and I'm really happy she said yes, because I really can tell you that I enjoyed immensely our sessions, Skype sessions, which we have been having during all this time, and these subtleties of translation process, like, always fascinates me also as a linguist, you know, and as a poet, and so this is like double jouissance for me. So double enjoyment for me. So thank you again, Annie, for being my translator. Yeah, I don't know, maybe Annie can say a couple of words. How is it to work with me? I mean, I think it's rather maybe difficult for people who translate into English and whose mother tongue is English, because most of us, you know, speak or understand English, and so to say, you can check it, yeah. So and then can criticize or can ask questions. And I don't know why, but I think that I don't have a very good reputation among translators, because yeah, I can be very, how to say, I can
Engaged,
be
very engaged.
engaged.
No, I think of these very much as four-handed translations. So Volha has always been really involved in the translation process because, like I said, I came to this through speaking Russian, which obviously is not Belarusian. So like learning to translate from Belarusian has meant also learning Belarusian at the same time. And so obviously working with Volha was really necessary for part of that process, but also, yeah, has been, I always have to laugh. My mom always says, if you're talking to a child and they've drawn a picture and you're like, I don't know what this is of, you'd never say, what have you drawn a picture of? You always say, tell me about your picture. And Volha quite often has me going, so tell me about this poem. Tell me about the third line. What's going on there? You never admit that you don't quite know. Yeah, so particularly, I think you'll hear, and we can maybe start with the poem in a moment, but a lot of these poems are quite surreal in some ways. And for me, being able to talk to Volha about what the image is behind some of the surreal stuff going on has been really necessary, to be honest. So I've really enjoyed that. And I have had poets who sometimes will come back with things and you're like, no, but what you want to do isn't English. I did have to explain to a poet recently that what she was trying to do in my translation would make it sound like Yoda, and that was not where we were going. But luckily she listened, so it was all fine. But yeah, Volha, should we start with our first poem?
Yeah. Some German in my head, so I wanted to say Gerde. With pleasure. Yeah. So we decided that I read Belarusian and Annie reads English, and maybe we will switch. Sometimes I will start Belarusian, sometimes Annie will start in English. Треба написати новий вірш сьогодні, кажеш ти зранку, про чорного собаку, який бив моєю одинотою. Лепш напиши про качку, яка була твоєю радістю, раю я, і вже бачу, як яна робиться частку вірша. Але сьогодні ти у меланхолії, редко смієшся з жартів і зовсім не розглядаєш качку своїм персонажем. Няуклюда, нязграба, пасує одно колиханкам, лімерикам. А табе треба писать сур'ёзны, удумлівы тэкст. І мы з качкай застаёмся па гэты бок няўяўнай рэальнасці. А ты з сабакам па той. І адзінае месца, дзе мы ўсе сустракаемся. Гэты верш.
Oh, today I must write a new poem, you say this morning, about the black dog who was my solitude. You should write about the duck who was your joy, I advise, and already I can see it becoming part of the poem. But today you are in melancholy, hardly laugh at jokes, and just don't see the duck as one of your characters, a fool, an oaf, fitting only for lullabies, limericks. And you have to write a serious, thoughtful text. So me and the duck are left on this side of inconceivable reality, while you and the dog are on the other. And the only place where we can all meet is in this poem.
Thank you.
So, Volha, I wanted to ask you, you've got a lot of poems about ducks. Do you feel like you more write limericks and lullabies, or is it a figure of joy for you?
Yeah, I think it's already a new stage in my life, if I can say so. When I overcame, or mostly overcame, this darkness, which still exists, and this melancholy. But I also started to learn see brighter sides. And the other thing is also, maybe it came from me translating this Japanese haiku poet Kobayashi Isa from the 18th century, who paid attention to any tiny insect, or so anyone could become a character of his poem. And maybe it gave me also an idea. Really, we have some kind of this hierarchy of even an animal, flowers, or whatever, who is considered to be higher in the hierarchy, or like a serious image, and then those creatures who are not so much suitable maybe for serious poetry or poems. And maybe it's also kind of ironic way of mine to try to shatter this in European poetry. I'm not saying I'm the first one or the only one who is doing that, but it just came to me, to my poetry, and maybe that's why. And the third thing is, maybe I just start to see them more often, or ducks are definitely the birds you can see in the city. Still can see in the city.
I mean, in Edinburgh, seagulls are the birds you can see in the city. But yes, I know what you mean. Shall we move on to our next poem?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, we'll start with the English for this one. This was actually the first poem of Volha's that I ever translated. I never thought it this hard to wear a dress, skirt, heels, necklace, without transforming into a tree at Christmas, or to transform and not notice. It's so hard being inscribed in a body which maybe didn't even want to have me inscribed in it, and to be dressed just the way that it is. Maybe it wanted to be seen more by those around me, and so my baggy shirts enrage it, while I'm enraged by it in return, forgetting that every woman among us and every man was born naked. Before the mirror in the hallway, I use my eyes to remember everything we've been through, and it looks at me sullenly. For today, once again, I am wearing something that doesn't quite fit.
Yes, and now I read the original, and then we can maybe tell you a couple of things about it. Ніколи не думала, что так тяжко носить сукенку, спадніцу, абцаси, каралі і не ператварыцца ў калядную елку, ці ператварыцца і не звяртаць увагі. Гэта сапраўды цяжка, быць упісанай у цела, якое, магчыма, і не хацела, каб я ў яго была упісана і менавіта так апранала, як апранаю. Можа, яно хацела стаць больш бачным для навакольных, і, пэўна, на мае кашулі вольнага крою злуецца. А я злую адказ, забываючыся, што кожная з нас, ці кожны, быў голым народжаны, ці была. Калідоры перад люстэркам узгадваю вачыма усё, што з намі было. І яно глядзіць на мяне панура, бо сёння зноў не тое апранула. Дякую. So we had some, how to say, conversations. What to do with this poem, because you could feel probably in Belarusian it has certain rhythm and even rhyme,
which is quite unusual. I don't think I've come across other poems of yours where you've really worked with rhyme that much. And of course I picked this one first. Really great.
But I don't know, we decided that it's better not to make it that much rhyme in English.
Yes.
Maybe Annie can tell us why.
We do, so the beginning kind of has an AB rhyme in Belarusian, so you've got sukenku, karali, yelku, uvagi. And in English, I made it a bunch of rhymes at the start. So address, necklace, Christmas, notice, where you've got all of those sounds repeating, which did involve playing around a bit. I mean, you'd never say a trio Christmas. I am very aware of that. So there was a little bit of inversion there to make it happen. But then later on, because we kind of felt like we'd built that rhyme up at the start, we didn't need to return to it. And I would always be much more in favor of kind of focusing on the rhythm and making sure you've got the music of a poem really, than worrying too much about the rhyme, which can come across as really forced. But also in this one, which generally hasn't been an issue, I don't think, but was the problem of Belarusian verbs being gendered, because there's that lovely bit in the Belarusian of oh God, I'm going to pronounce this so badly. Can you read it for me, Volha?
Народжений голим, там, что там кожний перенес?
The last three,
Що кожне з нас, ці кожний, був голим народжений, ці була. Була.
Which, if you don't speak Belarusian, is like every male one of us and every female one, but like that's one word. So it's like each male and each female was male born naked or was female born, which sounds beautiful in Belarusian and does not sound beautiful in English. And it's such a nice, it's so nicely compacted. It's kind of like Russian dolls or something, that you've got like female, male, male, female, and they're kind of bookended. And so that became forgetting that every woman among us and every man was born naked, which is very accidentally now a RuPaul reference in English, which was not intentional. And yeah, that was one where I was very aware of the different language systems and kind of working between these linguistic systems which don't quite match up. But I actually really like that solution, despite the RuPaul reference. So.
Yeah, I mean, maybe also working with Annie has taught me one thing, to be more also flexible to the translations. I mean, to let it go, to trust. Because translation is always about the trust, I think, and I'm really happy we can talk, because during our talks, I see the argumentation base of Annie, so she can prove her point, then I agree, and it's really nice, because I think now I'm more also relaxed to other suggestions of other translators when I work with German, let's say German text and German translations. And about the rhyme, I think it's just because maybe this particular poem was already in my head in this image, in this sound image as well. It's very hard then to accept that, now it sounds completely different. And what I thought was the most important thing for that poem, as if like for Belarusian, suddenly is not. I mean, in English, it's something else which makes it, I don't know, nice and beautiful. Yeah. And here I also remember this again, some parallels with the Japanese poetry, because, for example, for them, it's about rhyme is something really unnatural. I mean, they don't like it because for them it sounds unnatural, and everything which is not unnatural or artificial, which is not in the nature, it's not beautiful. But interestingly enough, today I was searching for translations of one. This is the book 100 Poems of 100 Poets. It's classical tankas of Japanese poets. And I found one version, which is free, by the way, it's online, in translation into English. And I also find the Russian anthology of the same book. And strangely enough for me, they made it completely rhymed in English. Yeah, I don't know why, because I mean, in Japanese it's not rhymed. Even Russians didn't rhyme it, and the English decided to rhyme it. I was surprised. Yeah. So every translator decides for himself or herself. Yeah, with this rhyme thing. So we continue.
Shall we do our favorite poem?
Yeah, and this is the poem which gave the title. Yeah,
for the collection.
Yeah, for the collection. I just mixed the book because I'm reading from a Belarusian edition, though it's not identical, because in Belarusian, yeah, maybe we should also say later about it, about the book. And now the poem. Повольні за інші органи регенерується серце і цілком ніколи не обновляється. Так написано в підручнику. Значиться, думаю, усіх, хто туди потрапив, там застануться. У когось сотреться левая частка тела, зникне твар, і на месте старого вырасте новый. Перемешаются мовы, імёны, гады. Мой сад мутантов, где заблукали мы.
The heart regenerates more slowly than other organs and is never renewed completely. That's what it says in the textbook. This means, I think, that everyone in there will remain. The left side of one person's body will be erased. A face will disappear, a new one growing in place of the old. Languages, years, names will intermingle in my garden of mutants where we lost our way. So this is now absolutely one of my favorites, but when I translated it, it was very much one where I was like, Volha, tell me about this poem. And there are some, I'd completely forgotten this, but looking, so the collection in English is bilingual, and you do have both versions facing each other. And looking at it now, I realized we did partly change the formatting to make it a little bit clearer in English, potentially, to me at least, what's going on. Which I don't know if you remember us making that decision, Volha.
No.
No, so the end of it, we've kind of brought structured ideas a little bit more.
Oh yeah, because in Belarus and those two lines are stand separately. Yeah.
So that was, I mean, less so with this poem where we just made that structural change, but there were some conversations because it was quite an involved translation process, and quite often I was translating poems that were really newly written by Volha, so it was quite interesting that sometimes we'd end up actually editing the original Belarusian because of the conversations we were having about the English.
Exactly, and this is the other interesting thing which happens. I mean, how much translation process can influence the writing process itself. Yeah, that's really true. And I can say that everything, I mean, all decisions which were taken for this book, they were thoroughly weighted and and discussed. And now just thinking about this line break and things, I'm not that strict in terms of how it looks like, that it can look different in the translation, because I can understand that for certain things the translator can need to break it differently. And with that I'm kind of really okay, and maybe not that strict.
What had you been about to say about the book before you read that?
Yeah, I wanted to say that actually this book is unique because we don't have it in Belarusian, because this is a compilation of different poems written during different times. I'm not sure, maybe they, no, sure, I mean, this one came already later, but because of the preparation process, we included here already quite new poems, which haven't or hadn't yet been published in Belarus. And yeah, and then this book appeared, this is the latest in Belarus and Slovakia, some Police. And most of them, they come from here, but as I've said, there are also old ones from my old collections.
Which is really annoying occasionally as a translator.
Really?
Be like, oh look, I've got these lovely poems of Volha's that I've translated and I want to send them somewhere, and Volha will go, yeah, but it's quite an old poem though, isn't it? And I'm like, I've translated it though. Can't we translate something new and send that? So it's interesting. I think as a translator, you quite often have a huge amount of love for these poems, which the poet themselves views a lot more critically, which is always an interesting one. But I quite like with this pamphlet the fact that it's sort of it feels a little bit like a journey through Volha's work and different collections. So it's hopefully a good insight. I'm aware of the time, so we might want to skip a couple of poems, but shall we do She Was My Very First Friend, because we've not done that one before?
Yeah, okay. Yeah, it's quite long for me, but why not? Annie was very kind, and she decided to support this poem and said, let's read it. So should I read it in first in Belarusian?
Go for it, yeah.
Yeah, I think maybe. Яна была моей самой першай сяброўкай. Прыгожай дзяўчынкай з рэдкім імем і валасамі да попы. І сяброўства наша было такім моцным, што калі нам было 6, мы думалі ажаніцца. Шлюб здаваўся нам тым, што гарантуе магчымасць быць разам заўсёды. Ейная мама, як і я, грызла пазногці. І тады сяброўка ганіла нас, і мы з мамай пачуваліся дзецьмі, а яна дарослай. Нашмат пазней я даведалася, што ейная мама ставіла мяне ў прыклад, таму што я, хто б мог падумаць, насіла піжаму, а ейная дачка не. Такое непрадказальнае захапленне. І толькі аднойчы я бачыла, як яна раптам заплакала. Калі словы, кінутыя хлопцам, вышылі жоўтую зорку на рукаве ейнага паліто. У той дзень я доўга плакала дома на кухні і састарэла на ўзрост чалавечых 15.
She was my very first friend. This beautiful girl with a rare name and hair down to her bum. Our friendship was so tight that when we were 6, we talked of getting married. Marriage seemed to guarantee the possibility of staying together, always. Her mother, like me, bit her nails, and my friend told us off, and the mum and I felt like children, and my friend like the grown-up. Much later, I learned that her mum pointed to me as an example, because I, who would have thought, wore pajamas, and her daughter did not. Such unexpected admiration. And I only saw her burst into tears once, when words thrown by a boy stitched a yellow star onto her coat sleeve. That day I cried for hours back home in the kitchen, and I grew old as human hatred. But then something changed, and we stopped seeing each other. Mobile phones appeared, liquids were banned on planes, some places legalized a relationship with any person. My friend buried her mother, started a family of her own, which she had longed for so much. I hadn't known, like many other things, painful and uneasy. And she only once said, "Sometimes I hold on to the air." And I thought just how unfair this was, and that you need so much courage to hold on not to friends or a husband or relatives, but onto the air. Now she reads my books to her daughter, and perhaps she too points to me as an example, although I don't wear pajamas anymore, while I point to my friend and other women who, holding on only to the air, hold us all.
Thank you, Annie. You saved me. Yeah, I'm sorry. I getting emotional because it was really a strong moment. Yeah, because this girl. It's true stories. I think all poems are true stories, or true stories hide behind every poem. Yeah, and that's really true. She was. I only once saw her crying, and it was maybe we were in the last class of our school, so we were like 14, 15, almost not sure yet, maybe 16. Yeah, and then that boy said really nasty things about her being Jew. And for me, it was really like a shock. I never thought how much hatred there can be in one person, and you can express it so obviously and so vividly to the other person. So thank you for finishing it. Sorry you haven't listened it till the end in Belarusian. Yeah, now I'm thinking a little bit like how to read one more poem, which is also quite tragic. But
13th of
we'll
October?
see. Yes.
Maybe we should do something humorous instead. Maybe we should do mandatory happiness as a pick-me-up.
Yeah. So about the book we've told a little bit, and then maybe we can continue. And our plan was also to present you one poem which is not in the book. Yeah.
Well, why don't we? Sorry, I'm looking at the time. We planned way more poems than we are going to have time to read. Why don't we do mandatory happiness and then the poem that's not in the book, and then do a Q&A, and then finish with the film poem?
Yes.
Okay.
That sounds good.
So if we do English first for mandatory happiness. Awesome. This is another one of my absolute favorites. I think it's such a lovely, small but perfect poem. Mandatory happiness was being handed out on some Straße yesterday. They ran up to me and said, "You have such irregular eyes. Do take some." I took it home, stuck it in a cupboard without looking at the instructions. Turns out I have to live with it.
Thank you. So again, it's quite an old poem. Примусове щастя раздавали учора на нейкой там штрасе. До меня подошли и сказали: "У вас такие неправильные вочы. Возьмите себе кавалок". Я принесла його додому, поставила в шафу і не прочитала, а оказалося, зим треба було жити. Так.
So if there's a true story hiding behind every poem, does this one have one?
Yeah, it was long ago, and actually, this poem serves to me, how to say, like as if me who I am now sending this message to me who was done, because I'm afraid to lie, but 2007 maybe, yes, and I should say it was very hard time for me, and also for me as a person, as accepting myself as a woman, as a poet, as a person, my body, all those things. With love, I think I lacked all those things, self-compassion and self-love. And so that's why I'm really surprised when I read this poem and remembering what a gloomy person I was. How could I write such a poem then. Yeah, but I'm happy it happened.
So that was the time when you were writing more about black dogs than about ducks.
Yes,
Fair enough.
definitely.
Well, shall we read the new poem and then open up to discussion? So yeah, if folk want to join in with, do you have any questions or comments, then we'd love to hear from you after this poem. Volha, do you want to do the Belarusian first?
I think yes, and this poem is very young, a young poem, because it was written this winter, I think, somewhere in December, and it was also kind of the. I mean, I wrote it just because I wrote it, but then this opportunity came up here in Munich. In Munich, they have Adventskalender, poetry Adventskalender, and so they also invited me to write this poem in the underground station on the so they have a big wall organized and invite different poets and also invite people who just pass in the underground to write some poetry on the wall. So when this poem was there. У некоторых людей сердце знаходится так высоко, что доводится брать лесвицу, каб туды добраться. Некоторые носят сердце свое на рукаве, а іншие, дык і зусім хаваюць у пятках. Здараецца, сердце пераварочваецца ў целе, скочыць і абрываецца, нібы акрабат на трапецыі. Тады самы час выклікаць хуткую дапамогу, каб яго яшчэ можна было б камусьці отдать.
Some people carry their hearts so high that you have to climb a ladder to reach them. Some people wear their hearts on their sleeve, while in others the heart sinks down to their shoes to hide. Sometimes it happens that the heart flips over in the body, skips and plunges like an acrobat from a trapeze. And then it's high time to call an ambulance so that the heart can still be given to someone else. That's one that uses, I feel like a lot of people here will be like best placed to actually get that poem because it's got idioms from English and Belarusian and I think German as well, am I right?
Yeah, that's true.
So it was quite a fun one to translate.
Yeah, I haven't tried this poem in Belarusian, so I really don't know how they perceive this line. Носить на рукаве, so this is typical English idiom, yeah, to wear the heart on the sleeve, which we don't have in Belarusian. But yeah, I think it still works.
I think I liked that one knowing that that's a weird image in Belarusian because it meant that it was fine for other images to be weird in English. Still kind of keep that moment of sort of dislocation or not quite knowing what's going on. But I also think it's quite interesting because this one does remind me of the poem of In My Garden of Mutants and sort of the heart theme, but sort of the mix of the metaphorical heart and the physical heart. And I like that as a connection running through the poems.
Thank you.
Yeah, I don't know if anyone has anything they want to join in with. You're very welcome to do so. So if not, we will just continue spraffing.
So could we ask questions now?
Yeah, go for it, please do.
Yeah.
Or you can just say something, some comments. It does not have to be a question. You can just share something.
Interesting at the end of a reading, it's like, oh, you can say a comment and not just a question.
Well, I don't know whether this is going to be a comment or a question. I really love the playfulness of your poems about death, and your darker poems are still very, very playful. And I came across it a week ago, in particular when I was teaching my friend. I do Belarusian tuition, and I was teaching my friend Belarusian, and we used one of your poems. And that was the poem about 13 different ways to die. to avoid making a choice. And I just wonder whether you would want to read that one if that's, you know, if that's easy. But it's really a great poem. And my friend's comment, she is Russian, and her comment was, well, this is the Belarusian soul.
Really?
Anything to avoid making a choice.
This is the Belarusian. Oh yeah, right. But again, this is a very old poem. I think it comes from my first book. Yeah, so I'm just opening this firm. My first book was called Reconstruction of the Sky, Реконструкция неба. Так, овечки. Реконструкция неба. And it had not only poems, but also mini avant-garde novel and a play. And this poem, Carolina is talking about, yes.
On page 43?
43. Just it's okay. Yeah. Я частково помру, частково загину, кавалками зникну, кроплями высохну, жменями развеюся, каменчиками потону, шматками спорахнею, куля отручуся, патами задихнуся, викинуся, порвуся, по швах розійдуся, під коли потраплю і зникне проблема вибору.
Thank you for describing the Belarusian soul.
I do want to hope that it's not only this, that there is something else. I was so born in Belarus.
Just really indecisive. I think that's a really nice point though, because I feel like one of the things I really like about your work, Volha, is this lightness, but a lightness about things that are really quite heavy and quite dark. And sort of that contradiction is something I really enjoy working with.
Yeah, but I think also, you know, for maybe for younger people, it's more typical that they write more about death so openly, let's say. Although in my later books there are also about this "Смерть моя будет кокеткой." Yeah, it's also, but it's already has more maybe, I don't know, or more philosophical, more calm, not so dramatic, not so znadrivam. I don't know how to say that in English. Yeah, I had an interesting little discussion with one of the poets, also young one, and he said, you know, his favorite book of mine is one of the oldest one. I mean, not the oldest, but like just maybe a certain one, because there is this nadriv. It's like this, how would you say that? Nadriv. So there's this like tension, or I don't know, like, you know, immediateness of the emotional moment. Yeah, something like this. And yeah, and in older poems, something else is more important for me, you know. So it's more meditative, maybe, with more distance, maybe. I don't know.
Have you found, so you've mainly been based in sort of Germany and Austria the last wee while, and you've obviously got the book out in Germany as well. Have you been aware of different reactions to your poems there than you have in Belarus?
Maybe not really. Maybe not. No. I remember one person at the German reading said, like, this is so that I can understand the poems you write, so like everything is clear. And I thought, okay, I'm glad. So, you know.
I think compared to a lot of German poets, I can totally understand why your poetry comes across as very clear. So that's fair enough. There aren't 1,000 references to Nietzsche in every line. Mm.
I can comment on different perception of Volha's poems in Belarus, and not that from a knowledgeable point of view. It's just since the lockdown, I started logging on onto all sorts of things, including a meeting of some Belarusian intellectuals with Volha, who was already in Austria, and they were looking at her. So what's happening with you? I'm not sure if Volha remembers that, but there were big intellectuals names in Belarus, and suddenly Volha, they started looking up at her. So there probably has been change of perception in some way.
That's amazing.
Last year meeting in cafe, whatever they called it, Abderalovich.
Yeah, with the Babo. Yeah, it was a talk about camel travel. Yeah. One of the, by the way, rarest thing to happen in Belarus to talk about literature and novels. I mean, because in comparison to how much attention camel travel got in Germany, and in comparison to Belarus, it's like you can't compare it. I think Belarus around like 2 reviews or 3, something like this. But that's understandable. I mean, maybe it's not that interesting for Belarusians to read about their own childhood.
So just for context, that's so Volha's got a sort of novella out, Camel Travel, which has been doing really well in Germany. I keep seeing all of these reviews popping up in German, which is lovely, and which we are wanting to work on translating into English. That's the next big project. She says, wondering when she will have the time. But yeah, and that's sort of reflections on her childhood.
Yeah. So some entertainment also we prepared a little bit. I mean, some visual thing, because again, sorry for coming back again to Japan. Just because I'm now preparing this book, and I'm again in all this, how do you say it? Lecturing. Do you use this term in English? No, lectorat. When you do this for the book,
editing.
Yeah, right. Sorry. And again, how again, because they had this even specific genre, haiga, when there was a haiku and something like sketch. Yeah, so maybe it's also some kind of European haiga we're going to show you. Yes, and if you still decide to comment or have some questions, I think you will still have this chance, because the video will be in English. I will read now the Belarusian version of this poem. I think it's also the last, yeah. Yes, here is also the last poem. And I will read, and maybe Annie will say a couple of words about what we will show. Yeah, no? I mean, because you mentioned the person who made it. І сніла яна слова, і прочиналася, і не пам'ятала його. І було тоє слово простим і цельним, такім, што рабілася ціха і лёгка, быццам цяпер вядома ўсё. І рабілася ўсё зразумелым, патлумачаным і відавочным. І хацела яна прыгадаць тое слова, і шукаючы вучыла розныя мовы, мацала языком дзёслы свае і людзей іншых. Слухала птушак і чула дрэв, слухала шоргат і чула восу, слухала ціш і не чула слова. І вярталася тады ў гарады, і сядзела там моўчкі, каб не спудзіць рахманае сваё слова. І сярод натоўпу бачыла яна розных, і гукала іх слова, ці ты гэта? І многія ёй адказвалі, і многім яна верыла, бо верыць хацела, бо стамілася, бо доўга ўжо не спала. І пачала сумнявацца, можа, і няма таго слова. Каго не пытала, ніхто пра яго не ведаў. Сказалі толькі аднойчы. Слова тое будзе апошнім. І як прыгадае яго, забудзецца на астатніх і сама станецца словам. Дзякуй.
Thank you. So yeah, that's the final poem in our pamphlet, which I've realised we maybe haven't actually said the name of. It's In My Garden of Mutants, and it came out this year with ARC Publications. Probably good to mention. Volha and I worked with an illustrator, Clemens Buntig, who Volha's worked with before, to get this made into a film poem, and that's what we're going to share now. And I hope the music and everything comes across okay on the screen share, but if not, the visuals are lovely anyway. So bear with me one moment. You should all, can everyone see that? Yes, Volha, can you see that? Great.
And she dreamt about the word, and she awoke, and she could not remember it. And the word was simple and whole, making the world quiet and light, as if everything were now known, and everything became clear, explained and evident. And she wanted to remember the word, and in her search she learnt languages. Her tongue touched gums, her own and those of others. She listened to birds and heard the trees. She listened to murmurs and heard the wasps. She listened to silence and heard not a word. And she returned to the cities and sat there in silence, so as not to scare off her timid word. And among the crowd she saw others and called to them, "Word, is that you?" And many of them answered her, and many of them she believed, because she wanted to believe, because she was tired, because she hadn't slept in so long. And she began to doubt whether her word even existed. No matter who she asked, no one had heard of it. Only one time somebody said, "This word will be the last word. And when you remember it, you will forget all others and become a word yourself."
So that was the film poem we worked on together, which I have to say, I almost can't believe that I did that translation and reading, because it's gorgeous. It's what I'm really proud of, and it's so lovely to work on something that has music and visuals and poetry and really interweaves all of them together.
Yeah, thank you very much. It was really fantastic. And maybe also we didn't mention about the book cover. I think it's also a small thing, but very important for me. I'm really, really happy that we managed to get this painting, because this painting was made by contemporary Turkish artist, and her name is Nekla Rüzgar. And I saw this painting when I was in Istanbul in Modern Art Museum. And so I decided to be brave and I wrote to her and asked if it's possible we can use it, and she agreed. And the only thing we had to write to the museum again, because it's in the collection of this museum, and they were also very kind and let us use it as a book cover. So I'm really happy. So everything, how to say, work together.
Yeah, everything very much kind of came together and wove into each other. Yeah, so I'm aware that's our hour. If anyone does want to kind of jump in with anything they want to say, we're not going anywhere immediately. But thank you so much for joining us, and thank you again to Karolina and the Anglo-Belarusian Society and the Skarina Library. And yeah, this has been really lovely to have an outing of the book, and also, like, I know, you know, Volha is in Germany, and I know we have at least one audience member who is in Belgium, so it's wonderful to have an international gathering here. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Questions?
Thank you very much. It was pure joy and music. So lovely. And I really hope, Volha and Annie, that you will be able to come and visit the library, and we can have a gathering with you here in London.
Yes, please.
We'd love that. So fingers crossed.
I have had similar comments, since I understand Annie is involved in organizing St. Andrew's Poetry Festival. And as far as I understand, Belarusian presence was here the first time.
Yes, so we had Volha reading, slight conflict of interests, but, you know, and we also had Virginia Maud reading this year, which was lovely. It was really, really nice to have those two voices. And we also, so this year we had quite a focus on Slavic languages. So we also had a lot with Ukrainian and Russian as well. And it was really nice hearing the different conversations around that and working with translators around it. But yeah, I'm sorry, my former boss is also here, so I'm looking at her to see whether we ever had Belarusian before, but I don't think we did. Was that our first time?
I don't think we did. No, I think that was the first.
But something, yeah.
That was a good way to start.
Definitely.
Yeah, and you sounded like you're in the bunker because you were reading from somewhere, not really talking to the audience. So hopefully one day we'll see you here in flash.
Absolutely, I hope so. Yeah, no, apologies for any bunker appearances.
The question I wanted to ask, that Volha is a linguist, so what's her linguistic interests and how they feed probably into the poetry?
Well, my initial interest in linguistics was gender linguistics, but then in order to defend my PhD, so I had to switch, because I was like, you know, in Belarus they said you can't defend PhD thesis on this on such a topic as gender linguistics, because there is no gender linguistics. So it was very funny. And I switched to semantics, and my PhD was on desire. So desire in English and Belarusian, comparative aspect. So how do people express their desire? So the category of optativity in Belarusian and English. And based on that research, I made up the dictionary. Yeah. And I'm not sure if you have it in the library, by the way. No, yeah, maybe we can think of sending a copy somehow. And then the habilitation thesis was dedicated to a broader topic of this one, is the typology of will expression, typologia воля выявления. Again, comparative aspect of Belarusian and English. Yeah. But I also was writing, like minor reports about semantic of pain, how people talk about pain in languages. It always had a big interest for me. Also translation themes, because those things are connected. Yeah, and really linguistics has been my big passion for a long time. And I think it influenced greatly on how I write and what I write and what about I write. But now I'm really not doing any scientific or academic researches at the moment. Since 2019, I'm mostly writing, so doing this poetry or prose things.
I've got a feeling that all these topics that you mentioned did feed into poetry.
Sure. Yeah. Thank you for the question.
I also wonder whether you studied any phenomenology, because reading your poems, the question of the subject and boundaries and fluidity of the subject, it just that there is so much philosophy in what you write. So yeah, if you can.
Yeah, that's true, because my second education, so to say, it was AHU in Vilnius, where I did master course in specialization was gender, but the main course, I mean, when we entered for this master course, it was kind of sociology, philosophy. So that's why, yeah, you felt it, right? Yeah.
Talking of Vilnius, this event was advertised in Belarusian and Scotland webpage, and we used to have a lady who now lives near Vilnius, and she's from that area, but she used to live in Edinburgh. And she said, "Oh, I regret." She's off to Vilnius today to some poetic festival. She said, "I regret I cannot join, but if I knew there was such a community, poetic, wouldn't have burned all her poems and wouldn't have thrown them away." She just started writing when she was back in Vilnius. Wanda Martins, she was going to be here and see all this Edinburgh crowd. She wished she knew.
That's such a shame to burn poems, or to feeling that getting rid of them is the easier thing to do.
She's publishing some now.
That's good.
She's not that bad, so she stopped throwing them away.
Good. I'm really enjoying the sight of different people's bookshelves. I still haven't quite got over it with Zoom. This is a nice mix here.
Можна я скажу? Пробачте, можна я буду на білоруській мові? Дякую велике за таку чудовну зустрічу. я чула ваш голос, ну, коли ви читали вірші у інтернеті, ось слухала вас, але для мене було такою радістю почути вас, як
Малю живую.
так, зовсім другий чоловік, повинна сказати. Так цікаво. І ось, напевно, це те, що я відчуваю з вашими віршами. Такий простий чоловік, і такі каже, і вірші, не ведаю, як це сказати, ви пишете чудово про прості речі, те, що завжди навколо нас, мені здається так, що, ну, ось, і я відчуваю вельми то ж саме, здається мені, але ви пишете це такими, насамрэч, з глибокими поняттями, і в той же час вельми просто це відчувати і розуміти. Я не ведаю, як це все виказати. Потім я ще хотіла сказати велике дякую перекладчику Анні, тому що вірші на англійській мові звучать настільки натурально, органічно, що ось, ну, вельми подобається. Мені дякую. І я не ведаю, ось, коли слухаю, чим більше слухаю вас, читаю, то я розумію, що я сама не поет, і ніколи не буду, і ніколи не писала. Але коли б у мене був дар такий, напевно, я писала б такі ж самі вірші. Гэта некае абы што, але вось вы нас гэта тое, што як я адчуваю.
Дякую вам велике. Не, вам дякую за такі слова. Ви все сказали, я зрозуміла все. Да. Вот, шкода, что, может быть, такое у нас ставление, ну, что мы так боимся часом, вось, ну, вот, как вы сказали, я не поэт, ну, откуда вы ведаете, может, вы и поэтка, может, и поэт. Вот в Японии, там все пишут хайку, титанка, потому что просто ставление інше до поезії. Мені здається, що... Oh, I'm sorry, I was talking Belarusian, I will switch to English. I was thanking for these kind words and said, like, it's a pity that we don't have such an attitude towards poetry as maybe Japanese people who, like, you know, who are very close to poetry in every, I mean, most of people. And maybe it would be nice if we also could start our education for kids with more attention to poetry and showing that it's not something so distant, something so, you know, unreachable or too sophisticated or too complicated, because my impression is that, sure, not here, I mean, here we're all poetry lovers, we don't have to I don't have to, how to say, to make you believe that poetry is something great, but for other people, I feel that there is so much, you know, like fear about poetry. They say, oh no, I don't understand poetry. Poetry is something for young people, or I don't know, too clever people, or who knows what other type of people. And yeah, it's great if I think more people would read and write poetry and just enjoy it. So thank you for your words.
Yeah, thank you. That was really lovely. I think there's it's so strange, we sort of children will happily plonk around on an instrument or grab crayons and draw a picture, but you're right, we don't have the same thing like that we do with other artworks, other forms of art. People are fairly happy to give it a go, and somehow with poetry there's that inhibition, and yet actually all you need is a pencil and a piece of paper or a phone or a laptop or whatever. So such a cheap art form, and yet.
Can I ask you about your children's writing then?
Yeah, sure. Yes, so the recent book is Одна шкарпетка, one she sock. I mean, why she sock? Because in Belarusian it's she, you understand it immediately, and it's important. And in English, you don't have grammatical gender, so that's why she sock. It's about, yeah, I think 5 or 6 stories, short stories. At the moment, I'm working on one project, which is anthology of non-rhymed poetry for children. And so I spent 2 months here in München in International Youth Library. It's one of the biggest library for children's literature, making this research. So I collected and selected unrhymed poems for children, which is really was a challenge, because first of all, it's not that easy to find unrhymed poems for children, and secondly, good unrhymed poems for children. And also I decided to include the poems which were not specifically written for children, but which can work. And at the moment I'm asking for copyrights and preparing the illustrations, and hopefully maybe in a year it will come out, because I also think it's interesting to shatter this canon that, you know, children are associated, or children's poetry is kind of associated mostly with rhymed poems, you know, and I think it can be something else too, not only rhymes, like nursery rhymes. Yeah.
Actually, we'll be looking forward to it. All the child has grown out of that, and while he was growing, I cannot help showing it. That was one of his favorite stories. We read it over and over and over and over and over and over and over endlessly.
Thank you, thank you. It's really a rarity. You cannot get it anymore. Yeah, completely sold out. Thank you very much. Yeah.
So do you think if there are no more questions, we should say thank you?
Yeah, well, thank you so much for everything. This has been really lovely.
Yes,
Absolutely. And I'm looking forward for the next next occasion.
Hopefully with camel travel, we'll
I don't know whether it would help to put a link to your new book here in the chat.
absolutely. I'll do that one moment.
Just before we go. I know that it took me 1 day to receive the book once I ordered it. So I was very, very impressed.
That is really good. Yeah, I've popped it in the chat now.
Mhm.
And thank you to for the kind comments as well, to folk who've popped stuff in the chat.
Mhm. Okay.
thank you very much. You're a great audience.
Yeah, thank you. It's lovely to as well to put names to faces for folk in the smaller world of Belarusian to English translation.
Mhm. So we shall be in touch, and thank you very much to everyone for coming and joining us today. Thank you, Volga and Annie, and hope you'll have more books coming from both of you, and more visits. Thank you.
Thank you.
Lovely. Well, thank you so much.
Bye.
Bye. Have a nice weekend.
Thank you.
Ciao. Bye bye.
Good to see you all.